Thanks for joining us for the second episode of the Divine Plan Project. I'm Deb Bullions.
And I'm Deb's project partner, Glenn.
All right, so last time in our first episode, we covered what the Divine Plan Project is about, how it came about, but we're going to tell you even more about that too in upcoming episodes. Status quo, what's happening now, and we will even refresh on that a little bit later in this episode. Today, we're going to explain some of the criteria, a little bit more about the project team characters, and the decision about the 5th or 5th dimension, whether it happens here or whether a decision was made to have it happen elsewhere.
And it's an interesting one. So hang around and find out.
Okay, so a little bit of background. About 8 to 10 years ago, Spirit began telling me about a spiritual project. Now, just for some context, I've had many decades on this planet already. And in my very first decade, when I was 3 or 4 years old, it was evident that I was communicating with Spirit. I was receiving information before things would happen. And by the age of 6, I was having visitations from beings, humans who had crossed over into spirit, who would come and visit me during sleep and later during my wakeful hours by my teenage years. So about 8 to 10 years ago, I was working in this field. I should tell you, I came out of entrepreneurship back in the 90s. I had several startup companies. I guess you'd call them startups in those days, or in these days. And I had 5 successful startups that were sold on to larger organizations. So I very much came from a business background. I had been in IT in the US, in both Silicon Valley and in Los Angeles before the term IT was even coined. So I was a front runner in that field, and then ended up in New Zealand, and that is where I had all of the multiple startup businesses and was a business entrepreneur. I then went on to work for larger organizations and consulting firms, helping businesses with business improvement, and later multi-million-dollar projects. As I 18 years later, was leaving New Zealand. I was in the multi-million-dollar projects and transferred with a boutique consultancy firm over to Australia and began work here. So if anyone wants to know what my background is, you can check my LinkedIn profile to see it's not all woo-woo. A lot of it was business. But in 2015, after decades of training, because yes, I had natural gifts, but who wants a natural doctor who has natural talents? You do have to train in your field sometimes to get better at what you do. I stepped more into full-time work within the last decade. So around that time, I started being told about a spiritual project that was going to take place. It was a little bit like, are you my mummy? Because I was, every time there were beautiful beings brought in, like soul family, I thought, oh, I wonder if this is my project team. But the vision hadn't fully come together yet and nothing progressed. And then, Glenn, explain this.
About 2.5 years ago, I'll
Closer to 3 now.
Yeah, closer to 3 now. I booked for an Akashic Records reading with Deb. And during that reading, I was told that I would be the divine masculine representative on a project with her. And to put that in some context or perspective, I don't come from the spiritual world, or I hadn't at that point. I had come from a government background, an emergency services one. And I was recovering from some trauma from that. And that's how I ended up finding Deb with an Akashic Readings record and
walked in the room.
Walked in the room. I'm just recalling it as we speak on it. Walked in the room and it was the most overwhelming feeling that I've ever had. I won't be backwards and forwards and saying I pretty much burst into tears.
As soon as you walked in, you didn't even make it to the chair.
Didn't even make it to the chair, and I burst into tears and I questioned her. I said, "What are you doing to me?" And her response was, this is an environment, I believe, where I think you said, where all the angels come, you bring in all the angels. And so the reading occurred, and we were told that we'd be working together on a project. And we had to learn over time what that was even about. And
It was quite
Yeah.
interesting because when he walked in the room, I had a sense of, oh, wow. Firstly, at his response, but secondly, that I started to have some drop-ins that for years I'd had this strange occurrence with dream time. So while I'd be dreaming, it was as though I was viewing a screen, either a movie screen, a TV screen, and occasionally, at least a few times a year, somebody would walk past that screen in profile, like if you were at the movie theater and somebody walked in front of the screen and you literally saw their outline in profile. But I could see him, I could see his dark hair, I could make out his face. And I always remember it would wake me up and I'd go, oh, wait, I know you. That's my friend. That's my friend. Come back. Where did you go? And then I'd wake up thinking, who was that? Because I don't know them in this lifetime, but I always had this longing for come back. We need to talk to each other. And that had been happening since I was a child. And I quickly realized that that was Glenn. But without me wanting to act upon that, and just in case I was wrong, I left the ball in Glenn's court after that first day, and it didn't take more than 24 hours before there was another phone call with more questions about the reading and just about certain things in spirituality in general. And within days, we were having several
4, 5,
hour-long
and 6 hour
conversations,
conversations on the phone, and
and a friendship
a
began.
friendship began, and we just developed this really, really amazing friendship.
And it's amazing because we were at really opposite ends of the spectrum of our beliefs about life, about how we approached life,
Mm.
about how we approached and our understanding of the masculine and the feminine. And yet we seem to have this amazing tolerance and patience with each other, even though it was very confrontational, that our views were so different. And yet we
Mm.
had patience to hear each other out. So I guess that's just a little background. It's not really important who we are, but we thought we'd better give you a little
A little bit
insight
of
into how
context.
this came together. We later did more Akashic Record readings. I don't know whether you want to call them spiritual pedigree readings or it's like the highest expression of one's soul. But I didn't go in to do that for Glenn. I stumbled across it because when I went in to read the records, I said, do you mind if we figure out? We felt like we'd had multiple lifetimes together because we seemed to know each other so well. And he said, of course I don't mind. So I remember sitting at my altar and opening the Akashic Records and finding out some of the beings that he had been in the past. And I was just about to close the records. And then I said, oh, wait a minute. So who was I to him? Because some of what I was learning was pretty amazing about him. And then they told me names. Now, some of the names that I received for him, we were able to identify as historical beings that existed. And then the names that they gave me for myself were actually their counterpart or spouse in those lifetimes. And it was all able to be verified. So it was pretty mind-blowing. And we spent about 18 months coming to grips with the fact that we were asked to do this project as it unfolded before us and dealing with our own worthiness issues because, let's be honest here, we're not perfect individuals by any sense.
In
Like
any sense.
we've been through life, we've made mistakes, we're far from saints. That is the understatement. And we've always done our best to help people, but humans are pretty flawed and we feel for pretty flawed and we felt very humbled to be asked to participate on this project. And then there was the other aspect, which is we spent about 18 months because some pretty crazy things, which we won't go into today, began to happen and unfold in our world, which left us in a pretty exposed position, feeling very unsafe.
Yeah.
Let us just say that there were all kinds of crazy things that happened that demonstrated to us, once we understood what we were being asked to do, that there were forces that were very against this.
Yeah.
And we'll let more of that unfold in upcoming episodes because it's not the point of what we're sharing with you. It's not about us, but we thought we should tell you this isn't just a clean PowerPoint presentation that came about easily. It's actually been more than a labor of love
Yeah.
for both of us. And there's been a lot that we have put on the line and
We've
even
lost a lot
lost just by taking part, but that's okay. We're still very, very honored
and humble.
and humbled to be able to bring you this information. So let's give you some more background about the project team. Yep, there's Glenn and myself, and then there is Thoth, and he has been proven to be the project manager on the other side in the spiritual realm. Now, we had to learn about him. He reigned as a popular and fair king. He was known for his fairness for over 14,000 years, if the mythology and the stories presented are true. And he says that basically we had different lifespans then. They hadn't capped off our DNA. And so beings lived for obviously a lot longer then.
They were different avatars, if you will.
Yeah, and then, when they begin to go back to Sumerian times and pre-Sumerian times, you can tell that the beings that were drawn on cave walls and legends that have been passed down all indicate that they were slightly different than humans. So Thoth was also known for writing the Emerald Tablets, and there is conjecture about whether they have or have not been found and what the contents of those were. But I guess we should share too that Thoth has also been related to Hermes, and we do have the Hermetic principles, which were laid down by Hermes, and the name of the combination of the two beings was Hermes
Trismegistus.
Yeah, I can't quite say it
Yeah.
right, but that's Glenno's space. All right, so Thoth, along with his consort, and a consort didn't necessarily mean wife, but it was a counterpart in work. It could mean romantic partner, but it did not always mean romantic partner. So Thoth, and I guess I say Maat, but it's Maat.
Maat, yeah.
Maat, his consort, they developed or were known to develop many of the languages used back in those times, as well as writing. And it was interesting because they called Glenn a scribe too. And so Thoth and Glenn had quite an affinity for each other because they're both considered to be scribes, and that is recording things, being very much the record keepers. And I would have to say that's a function that you fulfill because, in all honesty, when I do my work, it's in one ear and out the other. I'm channeling. It doesn't get laid down to memory because I'm working from heart space rather than head space. So Glenn is most definitely the scribe, and him and Thoth hit it off wonderfully. Now, Thoth is known to be fair, highly intelligent, and he's learned to get along with others and to avoid being drawn into political battles. And I guess that's some of the training that he's been able to provide to you too, is how to step out of the warrior zone and into the general zone, the leadership zone of not being drawn into the politics of what's actually happening, and instead to look towards the best possible outcomes and solutions for all.
Yes, correct.
Great. Okay, so more background. We've told you about one of the key players. Obviously, we've told you about more than one because we've talked about the Alpha and the Omega. We're going to talk more about them in this session, whatever name you choose to give that divine, Jehovah, Allah, whatever name you choose to give it. They're obviously the, the most instrumental beings to this project, Thoth being the project manager after them. And this is, we've been told, the largest project ever undertaken in the history of any civilization, any world or place since the creation of cosmos and life itself. This is the largest. So the project involves the spiritual realms, the terrestrial realms, the elemental and fey realms, the dragon realms, and the earth/human realms, and everything in between. But we're just giving you context with those realms and names that many of you will be most familiar with. Why are they all part of this project? Well, let's just start with some context. All right, so light, dark, and evil. Now, Glenn was actually a great teacher for me on this topic and subject. He had collected some information and done some validations about what this was all about, because when you are part of the spiritual community, at least, and light workers, etc., then many people say, oh, don't want anything to do with the dark. And so he was able to help give me some context, which really helped. And then there were other beings that came in to the project team in the early days, which helped to demonstrate these truths. So light and dark are frequencies and ends of a scale of balance. And when you think about a scale of balance, you have light on one side of 0 weight, and you have the heaviest measure on the other end. So it's the densest or the heaviest. Doesn't mean good and bad. It is simply a scale. So light beings can have dark thoughts and commit dark acts. However, these acts and behaviors are the exceptions for the light beings. Light beings tend towards love and forgiveness. dark beings can and do have light thoughts too, light motivations, light agendas, and commit light acts, but are more likely to be the skeptics and act with darkness when threatened. They lack consequences for actions, not so much on the front foot with love and forgiveness. And you can see how both ends of that scale are required to be here and live on Earth. We know that for those of us who tried to live in love and light, it's a tough gig when you've got other beings here who are all about dog eat dog, or the other end of the scale, which is about consequences for actions, etc. Now, depending on the area of the scale or the balance each type of being is in, will impact their outlook and their actions. So every human can be on any part of that scale between the heaviest and the lightest. Yeah? Between the lightest and the darkest. Each of us are our own unique composition, and probably no two fall on exactly the same point of the scale, or if they do, they probably have different expressions of that based on their own experiences. So we don't want to confuse dark beings with evil. That's like saying that nighttime is evil, right? So daylight is good and nighttime is evil. That's not always true when you look at the beauty provided through the nighttime, and the fact that nighttime gives us probably the deepest nourishment that we receive. We cannot, that's sleep. We can't say that night is evil. And so we can't confuse dark beings with evil either. Evil is actually an immoral and deeply harmful act or way of being towards those who it is perpetuated against. And evil can and does infiltrate and operate in both the light and dark. So a couple of examples of those things are churches, childcare centers. They are basically full of good people trying to do good things, but as with anything, anyone with evil on their mind can use them as hunting grounds. It does not mean those institutions are evil. It simply means that there are those who have evil on their minds who will be drawn to the light. They will be drawn to those institutions who primarily do good works. Anything to add to that, Glenn?
No, I had a thought, but I was just
It's a choice, isn't it,
yeah,
too?
it's a choice.
So, there are some very good people. We're constantly schooled and given lessons by the Alpha and the Omega, by Thoth, by the other project team members. We're constantly being schooled and taught the lessons of the masters, I guess you would say. And they explain to us all the time that evil is a choice made in a moment. And we learned recently that the more self-serving one becomes, the more it opens the door for evil to exist. And the more that we are considering our own communities or families or balancing our needs with the needs of others,
or the highest good of the
or the
collective.
highest good of the collective, the less likely, the very less likely it is that evil will infiltrate that. It is through selfishness. That is one of the ways or outlooks that evil can most easily penetrate, come in, and express itself.
And I guess that forced us, these little lessons that we've got along the way have really forced us to have to look within
We're
as
very
part of
accountable.
this. Very accountable.
Very accountable for every thought, every deed, every action. To be part of this project team has meant serious self-reflection on multiple, not just a daily basis, but multiple times a day. We have to consider the good for all, the good for all, the good for all, because boy, with the evil or the darkness, the things that have been perpetuated against us and against the project, it's very easy to look at things from a selfish point of view and throw in the towel.
Or get a little bit jaded.
Or get jaded. And we haven't been able to do that because we keep being reminded this is for the highest good of all. So why does that involve these other beings? Well, as in heaven or as in the realms, so on earth. So in today's popular spiritual climate, the opinion is that spirits are benevolent. Terrestrials are largely benevolent. But if we look, and that's in religion as well, those above, those in spirit, oh, they're God, they're angels, they're lords, they're this, they're just all benevolent. But if we really look at it, the nature of gods and goddesses of the past, or demigods and deities, and even archangels, we can see that not all beings are love and light. They're not.
No.
They're not here and they're not there. So even the God of the Bible, the Torah, the Quran, experience anger. And if the content is to be believed, then there can be some dark acts committed by those versions of that God, whatever name you give to it. So when you realize that everything in nature is balanced on a spectrum of dark and light, night and day, birth, decay, and death, you become aware that earth nor heaven or the realms can be all love and light. It's not possible. Everything is on a spectrum or has opposite polarities. If God or Allah or Jehovah or any name given to the supreme or divine intelligence behind all of creation has indeed created everything, then that being or those beings are responsible, or that energy is responsible for creating the polarities of light and dark beings, including evil. Hard to swallow, slap in the face, depending on your faith, your backgrounds, your beliefs. But you look at it, if there's a single entity, intelligence, energy that is pervasive of everything, then, and they created the scale, then everything is within that. But it'll begin to make more sense. So please don't feel defeated by that. It actually makes more sense when we talk more about this free will project.
Yeah.
They gave us much more context, so we had understanding. That is not to say that those beings are dark or evil. It is simply saying that this is a project where all things were allowed to exist. So once you digest this natural truth, consideration must be given to what is the point of this 3D existence? What's it all about here? The simple truth is, we're here to experience all facets of the spectrum between light and dark on behalf of the Creator. Whatever you choose to call that, we're each a spark of this divine being. It can be no other way. So we are having experiences, and it is all part of a free will project. It's like there's a full menu available to us, and it is up to us to choose how to dine out.
Yeah.
How to have our experience here.
And as in heaven, so on earth. I mean, you can apply this principle to simple biology with parents and children. When parents procreate, they are part of that child, and that child is part of them. And it's no different between whatever you call the creator, the alpha and the omega, and a soul or a human. Is that it can be no other way that
we are part of
we are
them,
part
and
of
they are
them, and
part
they
of
are
us.
part of us.
So it's like if we were trying to have a child and we gave birth to a possum, it'd be not just a fluke, but rather impossible. The
Yeah.
possum comes from the family of possums, and we come from the family of humans. But all texts tell us that we are the children of whatever that divine is, whatever name is given to that divine. So if we are the children of such, then they must be all aspects of all life. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Right? Whether it's a possum or a human, a terrestrial or a fish.
Yeah.
They have some expression in those forms. There's always a part of them that's a part of everything. Hope we haven't lost you here. We go pretty deep, but so does this project. All right, a little bit more background or a bit of a reminder. It's not only the earth that needs to be considered for a reset. We talked to you about archangels, and there are fallen archangels. There are fallen Elohim. There's the polarity of the good angels, the bad angels. Let's talk about gods and goddesses. You just only have to look at a god like Zeus to see that, wow, there were some wicked things done in those early expressions. And I know that we have all moved on from there, but again, it needs to be mentioned that those beings were of the realms, and just because they were of the past does not mean that they are not any longer. And that is a big key and secret that we learned. And therefore, this consideration for reconstruction or consideration of the entire structure of life is not just about Earth, it's about all places that life exists within.
Or as stated in some of the prophecies, the heavens and the earth.
That's right. So everything had to be reconsidered. Those of you who are into your extraterrestrials, we've been counseled against calling them aliens. That's a disparaging word. But for other life forms, if you believe in those things and if you follow those things, you know that there are races who are a mix of both light and dark, and you know that there are some terrestrial races out there that are, very self-serving and could be considered very dark beings, such as the reptilians, the Dracos, etc.
Yeah.
No permissions. Okay. As you can imagine, there are beings across all realms who have benefited from the oppression and imbalance, and therefore beings in all places who have pushed against this divine plan project. So when we talk about benefited from oppression and imbalance, most of you will see that today's world is pretty imbalanced. There are few people who benefit off the many. It's very imbalanced. And therefore, as above, so below, which we know is a bad term in some areas because of Alistair.
Yeah, Alistair Crowley gave that term a little bit of a bad rap, but
Or I should say there are some institutions who consider that work to be
yeah,
bad. There's no such thing as bad. It's how it's interpreted.
that's more accurate.
But I guess that's, one of the truer terms is what happens here is a reflection of what happens there. And it's echoed all throughout all realms, including the earth realm and the terrestrial realms. So if things are a little out of whack and out of balance here, and there are beings who are benefiting, because that's one of the key questions we've been taught to ask, who benefits? Who benefits? You look at this earth, and some of us go out and we feel like we're on a little bit of a treadmill or a hamster wheel. And you think we got to go out, we got to do this, we got to do that so we can pay the rent or pay the mortgage, got to put food on the table, got to take care of everybody. Who benefits from that? Well, for many of us, it's our employers. Some of it's ourselves, but we still have to pay our taxes. There's still a government. And then we say, who benefits? Who benefits? Who benefits? Now, it's supposed to be for all, but we all know that some of our tax dollars, wherever we live, are spent on things that we don't find beneficial. We won't go into that right now. We'll talk about that more in the future. Okay, so that gives you some context about why there have been beings across all realms who have pushed against this divine plan project, push back. And it gives you further scale for the context of what the holy war is all about. It's being fought across the entire cosmos and all the realms. It's about opposition to positive changes that are coming for the better, that reduce imbalances, reduce the need to learn through suffering, and create environments of more freedom and less oppression. Unfortunately, those who benefit push back. Struggle's real, and it's not only taking place here on Earth, it's taking place in the cosmos and realms wide. So, a little more background. The Alpha and Omega's dream, or Mother, Father, God, or Allah, or Jehovah, whatever you wish to call them. For there can't be, well, we'll talk a bit more about that in a moment, but you can't have male without female. You got to have the polarities. Their dream was for all ascended masters and the 144,000 light workers to walk and work together. Unfortunately, here on the earth, the matrix and the programming are so pervasive, and difficult to escape that so far they've seen that even the returning ascended masters are struggling to reach mastery level again. And the returning ascended masters and light workers have not come to a point that they can see clear to working and walking together yet. You might ask, why can't the divine intelligence, Mother, Father, God, Alpha, Omega, Allah, Jehovah, etc., step in and remove the illusions from in front of the ascended masters and light workers? But this is still a free will project, and they will not intervene. They haven't, for the most part, aside from a few of the great resets that we mentioned in episode 1, and we'll come back to again. But they haven't intervened, and they don't intervene now. And part of the rules of engagement here on planet Earth are coming onto the planet with a bit of a veil around your previous origins. So, for example, even ascended masters such as Jesus and Buddha and Muhammad, they've worked on their ascension while here on earth each time. They weren't born into ascension. They were born into lessons, learning, and ascending. No matter how special they were, no matter how special that being was, they still had their lessons to work through before ascension. And that just shows you how little interference that divine intelligence will have in this experiment of this free will project and experiment on Earth. They haven't been born into full remembrance, and free will was allowed to play out in each of the master's lifetimes. Even when faced with execution, the divine intelligence, God, Mother, Father, Alpha and Omega, Allah, Buddha, not Buddha, Allah, or Jehovah, whatever name given to that divine intelligence, did not step in even when their own master teachers were facing execution. So we said we'd come to this. Did you want to?
I just wanted to say real quickly on that. I guess that might help some people understand. There's the age-old question: why does God allow this to happen? Why does God allow this to happen? And I think Deb just explained it pretty well. Just saying.
Yeah, they put us here and we come down with our own soul contracts, if you will, things that we are meant to cover, experiences that we want to have, and they really don't intervene. Yes, does prayer work? Does meditation work? Absolutely. It can help us to reach higher realms and send our energy out there to have things come true. But the reality is, for the most part, there's no intervention. Yeah, so let's talk about this. Mother, Father, God, the Alpha and the Omega, have taught us many lessons. And one of the first was that God is both masculine and feminine. When I began to channel them, I was very surprised that I heard what sounded like a synthesized voice. And the first time that they really introduced, and of course, over the years and decades, of course, I have prayed to God in the past. Of course, I have communicated with a God-like being. But when they began to communicate with us and ask for our ear and our attention, it was in this, and I say us, but it came through me. It was in this voice that had both the divine feminine aspect and the divine masculine aspect. They teach us that God is both masculine and feminine. Life teaches us that life can't be created without the divine masculine and the divine feminine in most cases. There have been a few exceptional species where they have been able to morph and change their own sexual orientation and organs, etc.
But it's still a requirement of those separate energies.
The separate energies and polarities of energies are still required, even within those beings that can become both if need be. So God is the life force energy within each of us. That is what we have been taught, is that the actual energy that runs through us, the energy that runs through everything. You think about matter, a stone is simply vibrating at a different frequency than paper, and that is vibrating at a different frequency than the scales of a fish, and than our skin, and than our own souls. So they're saying to us that life force energy is that which we call God, Alpha, Omega, whatever name you choose to give it. We are told that we are each a cup from the ocean that is the pool of souls. So we each form a being and create a persona in each lifetime. So Glenn has created Glenn this time, and I've created my own persona. And that there's a huge imbalance between the genders of the divine masculine and the divine feminine. And in yesteryear, as we go back through history, we can see that the divine masculine engineered an inferior status and inferior significance for the divine feminine. When we go back way back in history, we can see the Sumerians and the Atlanteans and even the Egyptians had equality within the genders. You go back in deep, deep history, and you can see the evidence of the equality. There were queens as well as there were kings. There were rulers who were allowed to be female. And yet here with humanity, even as late as the 1900s, divine feminine were still trying to get the right to vote.
Well, there was a shift, and the shift in certain institutions came in and shifted into the divine masculine imbalance.
So I'll give you, yeah, thank you. I'll help to clarify that. When we talk about the pagan or Wiccan practices, which was the way of the divine feminine, was to understand nature, to work with nature for healing, to work with herbs, to work with medicine, to work with energy, to harness the moon cycles. All of those things, they're considered pagan or Wiccan. And most of the major world religions came in and made those things dark, labeled them as evil, labeled them as bad, and changed the nature of worship and who was allowed to be worshipped. And in the earlier religions and the earlier belief structures, and even in some of the later religions, but the earlier forms of those religions, they understood that the Holy Spirit, for example, was the representative of the divine feminine. And it has later been changed to the masculine. So it has only been over time that some of these establishments, civilizations, etc., have downplayed the role of the divine feminine. Why is that important? Well, tell you what, mothers don't usually choose to fight. The divine feminine's energy is more one of solutions, nurture, and trying to generate positive outcomes for all concerned. Now, that's not all divine feminine, believe me. We understand that really these days to succeed in the world as a female, you really have to, excuse my French, but grow a pair. You have to really compete on the masculine scale and remove your emotions because they're considered to be unhelpful in many leadership circumstances, or they have been up until fairly recently. And so you can see how this great imbalance takes place when you have institutions basically taking the gifts of the divine feminine, the gifts of insights, intuition, communication, and making them unlawful, making them dirty and evil. And some religions actually turned around at the same time and made future prophecies unlawful and said that the oracles and prophets who delivered them would be the work of the devil, which is so ironic because some of those very rulers, leaders, actually harnessed some of the great oracles of the past to gain information, utilized those seers to know what was coming. And in fact, their own heroes of the stories were those who communicated with the divine gloriously, truly. And it begs to ask the question then, why were they so special and why are we no longer special? It doesn't make any sense, does it?
No.
No. So again, we're not here to tell anyone how to suck eggs, what to believe, but we're just sharing with you the learnings that we have gained over the course of this project. And these are the things that this project team in spirit asked us to communicate for context about what is happening in these times on this planet.
Yeah.
So, can I have you recap while I hit the air conditioning?
Yeah. So to recap, this was in the last session. After multiple millennia, the humans have still failed to reach a point where ascension is the norm. We've had multiple resets, multiple resets, ice ages, floods, meteorites, and other resets, and that hasn't achieved the desired results.
Balance hasn't achieved balance. And basically where communities were emerging as balanced, they somehow mysteriously disappeared. Lemuria, Atlantis, the Mayans, and other South American civilizations, North American civilizations. You look back at the old cultures, even the Egyptians, Sumerians, etc., where there was balance, it seems to have gone further out of balance and tolerance as the millennia have moved forward. So you may have heard the saying that the Earth School now is a place of learning through pain, that there's no clear ascension path. Well, obviously not after billions and billions and billions and billions and billions of lifetimes. There's only been, according to records, there's only a few ascended masters that we know of, but there have been other masters who were not so well known. Imagine monks in caves who ascended through mastering what life was. And I say altogether, there's all told less than, well, only around 110,000. There's this huge imbalance between the divine masculine and the divine feminine. And leadership is
Self-serving. That's so reflective just by turning on the mainstream news. You can see this, and political systems are failing, and you can witness this again by watching even mainstream media. You can witness these things.
and even walking out in the world and experiencing the world. Think about this. How well is our leadership doing when a female cannot walk outside and feel safe after dark? How well are our political systems working when we don't feel that our children are safe at school? Are we tracking in the right direction? Throw back to 150 years ago when children played outside and there wasn't much worry or concern about that. And yes, of course, no one wants to go back to the dark ages, of course. But the reality is we have more leadership, we have more political systems, we have less self-rule, more rule that is in the hands of others, and yet we are experiencing more stress,
Suffering.
more suffering, and more fear.
Yeah.
Again, this is just the reminder, which we have to give you for context for what's coming next. Reminder is that in all of the great sacred texts, there's speaking about a new heaven and earth. There's speaking about everything being renewed. There's words about resurrection and beings being held accountable for their deeds and being sent into spaces in the universe that are relevant to them. Judaism states that God will create a new heaven and earth. Soon I believe in the arrival of a Messiah, at least some divine intervention in the restoration of justice. We get to Hinduism, a cycle that starts again. Taoism, the chosen will be rescued. There's talk in Zoroastrianism about later being a perpetual and divine exaltation. So basically, a Garden of Eden on earth.
Many promises through many belief systems, religions, and prophecies.
Exactly. So it's not one particular theory, religion. And these things are talked about outside too, as you said, with others who sit outside of religion. The Nostradamus and those types of great oracles have also talked about some of these things happening.
Yes.
So let's get to it. The big decision. After multiple millennia and multiple resets, the pathways to ascensions have not been easier to follow. There's more suffering, not less. The gaps between the have and the have-nots have widened, not narrowed. And the desired changes that we've talked about cannot be applied to beings who are already living here now. We can't get radical change while we are all here now with systems already in place,
And behavioral templates that are well established.
Exactly. Gradual change is proven to be completely inefficient.
And impossible.
Impossible. And for these and many other reasons, the decision was made to start again and populate in a new cosmos. So I'm just going to rest there for a moment, because this is a lot to take in. But the project team, this massive project team across all realms, had to make a decision that it's not possible to continue to allow gradual change to occur because situations were worsening. And the divine, Mother, Father, God, whatever name you give them, have said enough is enough now. Suffering is too great. And the free will experiment has led to pain, has led to frustration and suffering, and we are not ascending and leading to better things. And they're saying enough is enough. It's time to start anew now. That can be devastating, but if we think about it, it's going to be done in the most pain-free way, in the most simplest, straightforward manner, that everyone receives the opportunity of a fresh start in a place that, wow, we have some design work to cover with you so that you can understand how great the changes will be and why it will be such a much more magnificent existence for all. But let's let that digest just for a moment. It's in a new place. No more gradual change. It's time for the big change that was always prophesied by all religions and all oracles.
And so for the, for the spiritual community that I hear and I watch on YouTube and speak on the 5D and us ascending here into the 5D, that's not the case. It will be in a new cosmos, which we'll explain further. But I just wanted to point that out because I hear it a lot. The 5D is going to be here. We're going to do it here. We're going to do it here.
There's a lot of misunderstanding about that. They're not particularly wrong in some aspects. What they're saying is they're five-dimensional beings here and now who are needing to wake up. There is an ascension process happening for the 144,000. And in fact, that number is allowed to be greater for anyone who wants to be part of the positive change. There are all sorts of avenues to become participants in this. And so they are experiencing ascension symptoms. They are experiencing an awakening. They are having true experiences of shifting away from a normal human existence. But of course, if they're really honest about it, it's a painful process when you're doing that here in a third-dimensional world, a three-dimensional world that has still got these old systems of intolerance that do not allow for beings to be unique individuals and who are not necessarily in the practice of kind processes. So, how's this going to come about? Well, this is just a sneak peek of the new design, but let's tell you that a new cosmos has already been created, and it's a duplicate of the cosmos when the Earth was of an age of around 12,000 years ago. So, we were actually witness to it happening. We were told it was going to happen. The blueprint was used, and the cosmos was duplicated. So you have to ask yourself, how did it all get here originally? Well, everything that's here had a firm basis in planning, and the Akashic records or Akashic records or Tree of Life or whatever you wish to call it, the great internet of the sky, if you will, is much vaster than ours and has a record of all things. And so they're able to take these designs and blueprints and create again. There are changes in this new space, this new cosmos being made to our human avatars as well as the terrestrial avatars. And the continuum of dark and light will be cropped slightly to remove the capacity for some of the templates that exist now. So some of the worst templates are
psychopaths, sociopaths, premeditated murder, rape, and pedophilia.
Yeah, so for those people who have some predisposition for those things, where some of the things like, alcoholism and addiction and abuse behaviors that are experienced in two ways, through a family line that is actually ingrained into the DNA, as well as through the experiences of the individuals who then perpetuate them or do not, up to the individual, but those things will be nipped. The capacity just won't be there for that level of pain, that level of illness. There will be clear ascension pathways, and the awareness of the cycle of life will not only be evident in the new cosmos, it will be taught. So there will not be any more mystery. There will not be any more claims, false claims to have the one, the only way. There will be multiple Earth-type locations, fixed planets for multiple dimensions, allowing each soul to progress through the stages of ascension at their own speed. So if you imagine, some souls will not be ready just to go into this love and light, fifth dimensional world. There will be multiple levels of 3 in multiple places, multiple levels of 4 in multiple places, and 5, and so on. And we will bring you all of the details of all of those plans and designs in future episodes. There will be specific frequencies and lessons for the ascension on each dimension. So you don't just, it's not a cakewalk. Everyone still has lessons to learn, but you'll get to hear from us. And we're very excited to tell you about how some of those structures will work and how much more of a joy it will be to live. The structures of governance will differ for each dimension. As awareness expands on each new level, so will our capability for self-rule. Wisdom councils will take the place of juries on some dimensions. They'll be ready for that, where you don't have to have such a heavy-handed penal system. The wisdom councils will assist with small and large issues and include a cross-section of beings.
And we'll explain more of this as we go along.
Yeah, it might sound a little
might sound a little woo-woo at the moment, but it's been well thought through.
And we can't wait to bring you more details of this. Learning will shift from fear-based to love-based. So we'd all love it if our children could learn within our arms as we raise them and we love them. And then there's that moment we send them out into the world to learn within institutions. And some are even shipped off to boarding schools, etc. And we know that to get some motivation, some will resort to fear tactics, and that most children are exposed to bullying. And then we look at the world ourselves and workplaces and our experiences of even driving down a motorway, a freeway. And there's a lot of learning from fear, isn't there? A lot of horrible experiences that can create the learning base, and that is going to be shifting.
Yeah. Worship will not be encouraged. We will learn from the spiritual masters, but we will not be worshipping them.
And that is about self-empowerment, right? So yes, of course, the masters will be there. We have to have teachers that we can learn from. But when we worship them, we give our power away to those outside of ourselves. So we'll give you an example. Within one of the holy texts, and again, we are not married to any, but they say that God helps those who help themselves. And yet, when you hear about many people saying, why would God do that? Or that's in the hands of God, it's out of my hands. Well, they really want us to be self-accountable.
Yeah.
If we are a mini-me of God, then we need to be accountable to ourselves at all times, and to place our power and our hope and expectations in beings outside of ourselves has not been helpful on this planet, particularly.
And it's been a methodology of control for the beings within the realms who have fought hard against these changes.
Yeah, some of them have really benefited from the energy of worship being placed in their hands, but they have not always delivered on behalf of entire communities, if you will, all of the proposed benefits that should come from it. So that is our session for today. But we wanted to explain where we've been so far. In session 1, what is the Divine Plan Project, all the way through to status quo. We've gone through a little bit more about the project team that will continue to be forthcoming. We've talked just through the big one, which was the decision of whether to stay or whether to go, as far as rolling out the 5D. And we haven't even talked about 4D.
No.
But this is going to be a stepped process. We have so much more to share with you. As you can see on this slide, we're going to go through the avatars. We're going to go through the systems, the dimensions, what each one will be comprised of. We'll go through what happened when we consulted with the realms, or the realms were consulted with, what some of their ideas were, and even the consultation that's happened on the human realm. And then the really exciting stuff too. And again, this is not necessarily in order. We're going to bring you sprinkling of this in each upcoming episode, but we'll go through the models for governance in communities, financial systems, educational, correctional, guidance systems, what the actual layout of these planets will be like, because, oh my goodness, like right now, we're all fighting with, being eco-friendly and trying not to damage this earthly existence any further. Well, you can imagine what it's going to be like, because it's all been planned with that in mind. So living will be quite different than it has evolved into being here. There's new guidance in place. So you guys might look at it as commandments or principles for living. That's some of that has already come to the surface, and we can't wait to share that with you. And of course, how we can all work together, which brings us to the point here. If you're excited about hearing this, if this is starting to make sense to you now, that all of the promises are coming together, that things are going to get better, not worse, then join us, share this, subscribe to our channel to make sure that you don't miss out, and share this with the other light workers, because in coming episodes, we'll talk more about how we can work together, and communication is a really big part of that. And why? Why do we need to communicate this? Because if things get a little shaky on this planet, things go a little haywire, as they seem to be going now from all those threats from the 5 different areas, then people need hope. They need to know something better is coming. And that is what the 144,000 and the returning masters are here to do, is to support and provide the foundation for faith that regardless what your beliefs are, something better is coming. Thank you so much for
Thank
being
you.
with us. And we hope that you'll join us for episode 3 and that you will share, share, share.